Hi, friends. Welcome to another solo episode of this show. I am getting super vulnerable in this one. You can even see in the beginning, I get kind of hot. Not really a hot flash, but close to it because I was talking about the stress that initiated this intensive rehab at home month-long thing that I did. So I'm talking a little bit about how that went, which was great, but then also some specifics, letting you see inside of some of that so that it might be helpful to some of you as you are working through your New Year's resolutions, or maybe you don't do resolutions, but you're thinking about how you want to spend your time in 2025. So, hope you enjoy this episode. Please, obviously, leave us some comments and let us know how you liked it. Have you ever wanted to just disappear for a month and come back a whole different person? You just feel, I don't know, stressed or like you've gained weight, something's happened, and you just want to disappear. But you can't really disappear from your life. And so you maybe figure out a way that you don't actually have to disappear from your life, but you're actually kind of disappearing from some of the things that you would normally do in your life and retreating and having a reset. So it's really more about wanting a retreat, reset than anything else. Well, I did that. So I wanted to talk about it. I think I'm ready to talk about it. I did that in October. So from October 15th to November 15th, I did a what I called rehab at home or rehab in place. And I created kind of a rehabilitation, reset, retreat type of experience for myself while I was still at home doing all or at least most of the things that I would need to do. Right. So I didn't completely disappear from my life. I didn't go to one of those beautiful resort places where you can actually just do therapy and work on yourself for a month and then come back. And I didn't go to rehab where you go work on yourself in a rehabilitation type setting. I think of that as like a dreamy place, but I didn't, not an addiction rehab. But what happened was after the hurricane. So the second hurricane, I was doing pretty well during the first hurricane. I did well in general. But what I noticed through the second hurricane is I was using food, and it was very obvious that I was using food, dairy in particular, and probably a little bit of sugar. I don't think I had any sugar. I can't remember if I was doing some sugar or not. But those are two really big things for me, dairy and sugar, any kind of caffeine. I don't do caffeine or any of that. So chocolate is also quite a trigger for me. So, what I noticed when I was doing a lot of reflecting and writing after the second hurricane that we just had in 2024 here in Florida. So, we had Helene and then we had Milton, back to back hurricanes. Helene was devastating to our community here in Florida. I live in an area sort of between St. Pete Beach and Clearwater Beach in a beach community. So very devastating for all of us. And luckily, Milton wasn't as bad, but still just the stress of all of it. So, not surprising, it refocused a lot of us. It gives you an opportunity to think about what's really important to you when we have these kind of events in our lives where whatever I was worrying about before Helene just didn't matter to me after Helene. And yeah, it's just getting hot just thinking about it. Yeah, the stress of it all and all of that. So I was remarkably good through a lot of it. We were really lucky compared to a lot of people. So there is that piece. I had a lot of support, but I was also really, really focused on my own self care and doing the things quantumly, of course, that I know are going to keep my stress resilience up. So, the whole reason that I created the stress management course was because of all the things that I learned that helped me become more grounded, clear, and energized. So I felt more stress resilient than ever before in my life. So when the hurricane happened, I was in a really good position. I felt really good. I feel really energized and good and clear. So even though it was super stressful, I have all these things in place that keep me more stress resilient. And I just continued to do that. Continued to do those things. I know what those things are that are really important. Mostly that has to do with supporting my mitochondrial health and my circadian rhythms. But also just some things, personally, we each have some things. But what I did notice in my reflecting is I was like, there are a couple places in my life that I feel like have a lot of false or fake harmony. Like it seems good. I'm very well knowledge. I have a lot of knowledge about nutrition. I am really well equipped there. And yet I was feeling like there's a lot of false harmony there that I still will fall to using food to help soothe. It's a real slippery slope for me, and I am always working on kind of what does that look like? What does food sobriety? I know that's really triggering for some people, especially in the eating disorder community, but it resonates deeply with for me, and it feels very healing and healthy to talk about food addiction and food sobriety. And for me, I don't feel completely sober, even though I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. I don't do any drugs. I don't do any of the things. If I am not really feeling like I am fueling myself well with nutrition, then I don't feel completely sober. And if I know when I am dipping into some habits that most people looking from the outside would be like, oh, normal things. You're stressed. So you're eating, some potato chips, or you're having some cheese because there's a charcuterie board out and there's cheese, and my favorite cheese was on there. That doesn't sound horrible. That doesn't sound, like I'm really going off the rails. But for me, I can feel it internally when I start to slip in that direction. And so I was feeling that. And I wanted to get really clear. The other thing that I'm not willing to talk about yet, I might at some point, but there's another thing in my life that I was like, might need to take a look at that. That it feels like there's some false harmony there, that it's all pretty copacetic, it's all pretty okay, but not exactly where I want it to be, right? But I wanted to do this rehab at home, specifically around food addiction. So I wrote a plan, and I'm going to talk about it today because we're in January. Some of you, part of your New Year's resolutions, they may or may not be going very well. I don't know, but it feels like it might be important for some of you. So if this resonates for you, I'm going to tell you what I did. I know you can't follow my path, I can't follow your path, we can't follow anybody else's healing journey or their specific path. We can't follow people's path, their business path, their personal path. We can't follow another person's path. We have to be on our own path. But we can be inspired by others' paths. We can learn from other people and the path that they've chosen because people are sharing about that, so we can see what resonates for us as we're on our own journey. And that's why I wanted to share this today, is because whatever you're going through, if you're going through something and you're feeling like, I wish I could just disappear for a month and I could come back more revitalized and a different person. This is what I did, and it was really helpful. I felt like it was really helpful for me. I created a plan, and I knew there were certain things that I was gonna have to get done between October and November. October 15th and November 15th, very busy time. We were moving to a new platform in the business, lots of things going on in the business. So I couldn't just disappear, but there were things that I could take off of my plate. And so I decided to do that. I looked at my to do list and said, what can come off? What could I maybe delegate? Now, I have historically been very bad at delegating. I'm not generally somebody who hands things off to people and says, just take this and run with it and thank you and walks away and says that will be whatever it is. I have in the past been much more of a control freak and like to have my hand in everything, but also I don't like to burden people and hand things over that I feel like are supposed to be on my plate. They're on my to-do list. Well, I got over that in that month. I have got much better, and I feel like getting even better and better as each, day goes on because I've been able to trust the people on my team. They are fantastic, and I am figuring out what they do really well and what lights them up and what they seem to want to do that I don't want to do, and I'm handing those things over. And that has been really, really fabulous. But I had to look at what was on my to-do list and make some decisions about that. I also wanted to really beef up my self-care. So, if you know me at all, I'm really into radical self-healing. I've had some incredible transformational experiences in my life around health and healing, and I love to share all of that. So I know what works really well for me, but I wanted to ramp that up because I knew it was going to be messy, right? And what kept coming up almost to the point where it was comical, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, was shame, shame resilience, and Brene Brown's work. That was what was funny about it is random people that I would be saying something and somebody would say, you know what might really help you is this researcher, Brene Brown. And I was like, this is hysterical at this point. I used to work, not for Brene Brown. I worked with the curriculum. So I was a certified Daring Way facilitator, but also a consultant. So those people who were getting certified, so health practitioners that were getting certified in the work have to do a certain number of basically mentorship sessions. And so I was somebody who provided that. So it was interesting, but not only that, it was not only interesting that it just kept coming up, but also what was coming up was I needed to circle back to shame. And not only was I certified in the work, I did a ton of my own shame resilience work, like deep stuff. I was a part of a shame intensive where I went out to this beautiful spot in Texas with other helping professionals, and we all did our own deep shame work in small groups. And so it was really powerful. That's what I gave myself for my birthday. I think that was in like 2012 or 13, right around that 2012, 2013, somewhere around there. So it was a while ago. But when I tell you, I did a lot of that deep, deep work. And then it started coming up. People were recommending Brene to me, or a friend of mine that I reached out and said, I'm going to be creating kind of a rehab at home. And I wanted to talk through this with you. And my friend helped talk me through it. And she was really fabulous. But we were talking about shame a lot. And so because it kept coming up, I thought, okay, probably need to make sure that I have not just my own therapist who I've been working with for a really long time and she's just fantastic. She's helped me through so many different transitions in my life. So I started working with Diane after my father died. And really in 2012, 13, I remember coming to her and saying, I think I'm going to need some help because I'm going to do this shame resilience work and I want to live from my whole heart. I want to live a wholehearted life. And I remember Diane saying to me, just as clear as if it was yesterday, okay, but we can only move at a pace that you can tolerate. And I thought, not a problem. I'm a fast learner. I can I thought I was going sort of up at that point still, where you're doing all this self exploration and digging. And even though the digging is deep and what you think of as like going down and deep, I was thinking about transcending and upward movement and getting to some transcended place. And of course, there's nowhere to get because the journey is never over. But what I quickly realized is what she meant by moving at a pace that I could tolerate, that this kind of transformation takes a container because it's internally it's alchemy, and the alchemizing that's happening internally must be contained, because otherwise it would be like a butterfly or a caterpillar trying to become a butterfly without a cocoon, because the caterpillar literally liquefies inside of the cocoon in order to become the butterfly. And that kind of transformation needs a container. And so when we and do that in our own hearts and our own bodies, the kind of transformation that happens internally needs a container. And therefore, when I decided to disappear for a month, it was really to cocoon. So when you think about resetting or taking a retreat, pulling back so that you can do some of that internal healing, you want to have cocooning. You want to have a container for that. How are you going to do that? What's the plan and what supports do you have in place in order to create that kind of container so that the transformation can actually happen? And realizing that that kind of transformation isn't always pleasant. It isn't always rainbows and unicorns, and it doesn't always feel good to do that kind of transformation. It can actually sometimes feel quite yucky. And I'm trying to think of the specific word that comes to mind. It's not always friendly. That's what it is. It's not always friendly. It is love, the transformation. The medicine is love, and the transformation, if it's a real transformation, it is love, but that's not necessarily pleasant and pretty. It's often messy. So that's why you want to have the container. And what I really wanted to do was to make sure that I had specific support around food addiction. So not only did I make sure that I was seeing my therapist weekly, so Diane, I reached out to Diane because I see Diane a couple times a month. Every other week is good, sometimes once a month just because of our schedules. But when I have something going on in my life, I increase that to once a week with Diane. There have been times years ago when I was probably even before I stopped drinking alcohol, maybe right after I stopped drinking alcohol, things were shifting really quickly for me. And this idea of non duality was really up in my face. So every time I thought I really understood something and I knew where I stood on it, the opposite would be shown to me to be equally true. And it was right in my face. So I was seeing Diane twice a week there for a little bit because it was so intense. So, what I wanted to do for this particular rehab in place, rehab at home, reset, retreat, whatever you want to call that, was to make sure that I was seeing Diane weekly, but then also I wanted a food addiction coach. And so I reached out to one of my favorite people, Molly Painshab. I think I'm saying that right, Painshab. Her Sweet Sobriety, you can find her on Sweet Sobriety, and she's just a lovely human being. So I went back to my sugar sober group that I really love. That I just love the people. I really resonate there. It feels very comfortable to me. So I started showing up back there. I reached out to Molly and set up some appointments with Molly. I made sure that I had my therapist weekly appointment. Of course, I was doing all of the quantum health stuff. I am up at sunrise. I am outside a lot. I am getting light breaks throughout the day. I'm doing all of those things. Really, really particular is probably the word that popped in my head, but that's probably not the best word. But I am very devoted to making sure that I support my circadian rhythms, really honoring the dark, honoring the light. My food generally is really, really good, but I had allowed dairy to come back and a little bit of sugar here and there too. But really, the dairy was clearly a problem for me. Now, I have been allergic to dairy my whole life. Early on in my life, my parents were told, my mother was told that I was allergic to dairy, and I have been ignoring it for years, on and off. And I had allowed dairy to come back for a little bit. So I will do, like 6 weeks without any dairy, and then I'll have a little bit of dairy. It's kind of a shit show for a minute, and then I get it back together. That's been a pattern for me. It's not the worst addiction you can have, but it definitely causes me problems. And it takes me a full 5 days of being off of it to feel right again. I get very irritable and like I could feel like not just irritable, like angry, like I could rip your face off trying to get to a piece of cheese. That kind of agitated. I mean, like pretty intense. Not pretty. Not a pretty thing. I can feel that way for several days. So when I let sugar back in, and by sugar, I mean like honey or stevia, not like some kind of crap food necessarily. Sometimes it might be like when I was in Italy, I did have some gelato or that kind of thing. But even if it's, honey, I can go in a pretty not great direction with that where I start craving more and then I'm doing it more and often and all of that. That usually takes 3 days for me to end. So 3 days of not feeling great and cravings and then I'm over the hump and I'm on my way. Dairy takes 5 days at least, sometimes a full week for me to feel normal again after I quit. So I knew I was going to quit. I knew I was going to abstain, but I also knew that I needed to dig a little bit deeper into the shame stories around that and the feelings of shame or some other feelings that have gotten shoved down. Because when we don't acknowledge or feel the feelings, and I know feelings and emotions are two different things, but really digging into the emotions that are underneath some of the feelings that were bubbling up and allowing space for that. Like, how was I going to allow space? So, obviously, I had a lot of supports in place, things that beyond the quantum health strategies that I always do, I wanted to have some more things in place, more supports because I wasn't exactly sure what all was going to come up because you can't really ever know. But it was really helpful for me to be back in a support group and to have a food addiction coach, somebody who's really specifically helpful with the thing that you're trying to work on during your reset, rehab, retreat. If you choose to do this, if you choose to kind of figure that out. And I was going to look and see what exactly was on my plan, see if I forgot anything else. Because mostly what you want to do is make sure that you have that kind of plan, support, and container if you plan to do that. Right. So here are my notes. I even wrote IOP, right? Intensive outpatient. I was taking it seriously, even though it wasn't really like an intensive outpatient, but I wrote health addiction rehab 1 month intensive, right? And I had a whole thing. So Monday the 14th was my prep day of October 14th. I had a whole prep day and I had a whole plan for the prep day. And then I had the start day. I had Molly's consults weekly. I was doing the free support groups at least once a week, prefer sometimes twice a week. I was doing weekly therapy with Diane. I did sound therapy. That's the other thing that I signed up to do, a biofield tuning. I did 3 session package with biofield tuning sound therapist here in St. Pete. She's phenomenal. I'd love to have her on the podcast actually. Love her. So I wanted to make sure I was doing a lot of kind of healing things. I wanted to do some cranial sacral therapy and I never actually added that. That was on my list that I didn't do. So might do that. Then I was also building in some really specific experiences with people who are really helpful for me. So my dear friend Sarah, I had specific things that she and I were going to do together. I was also working out weekly. I was already doing that, but I was making sure that I was doing more beach walks in addition to my regular exercise that I do. So making sure you have physical activity and getting yourself out and having the support. Who is going to be the most supportive? What do you want around you that's going to be supportive? It might not just be people, it could be pets, it could also be books and a journal and music and things that you find really healing and helpful. And you want to make sure that you have all those things, but also that those things are part of your plan. Like, when are you going to listen to that music or the podcast that you have earmarked for this particular intensive experience that you want to do, or this disappear for a month and come back a different person? What do you want that to look like? And get really detailed about not only, write it out, what is it that what would a successful experience look like for you at the end of the month? How would you know that that had been a successful experience? And write that out. What fears and concerns do you have about that? And then what could you put in place to make sure that you have, and you can't make sure that you don't have fears and concerns the whole time. The whole point is to be in whatever it is you do feel, but to really shore yourself up with a lot of self-care and a lot of support around that. So I was also doing weight training during that time, which I do anyway. I also created a daily routine. So I had kind of a list of things that for the month, but then I had a daily routine. That daily routine is pretty much the way I live my life anyway. It's all the quantum health strategies. I will just tell you what it says. Sunrise 10 to 30 minutes in the morning. UVA 10 to 60 minutes. So sometimes I walk the dog during UVA light to make sure, but I'd like to get out there during at least the UVA rise. Sometimes I'm already out there because I'm already out for sunrise, and so I just stay into the UVA. But if you can, UVA light is most associated with focus and mood, and so it just can be really helpful to get some of that light exposure. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, all of my courses, this is what we do in all of the courses. And just stick around. You'll start to get the hang of it. Follow me on social media, come to more of the podcast, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, I know what she's talking about with all the UVA light and all of those things. So then I limited my work to about 4 hours a day. Sometimes I had to do a little bit more, but my goal was to work around 4 hours a day during that month and just to get super, super efficient with that time. So I didn't post a lot on social media. I don't even know if I probably posted some, but I didn't really post on social media. I cut a lot of things out and only did the things that were income producing. Meditation. So I tend to add my meditation to my morning sunrise, being outside. So I earth, meditate, pray, all of that all together. I layer in the healing. I know it's kind of like I'm multitasking, but I wanted to increase my meditation time to more specifically really visualizing what it is that I was hoping for at the end of this whole experience of the intensive. So remember when I was talking about the prepping, like when you're thinking about how would I know if this is a successful experience by the end of it, getting clear about that visualization visualizing that, writing it down, saying it out loud, all of the things that we do. I wanted to actually meditate on that vision for what this would look like at the end, and specifically do that and commit to that at least 10 minutes a day. Sometimes I would just focus on my heart. So I would just kind of breathe as if I'm breathing in and out through my heart and just focus on my heart. And that's all I could really do. And that's totally fine. Nothing is set in stone. You can always change it up. But I also did red light therapy every single day. My goal was to do 20 minutes a day, but even if I only had a minute, I would do that. Obviously, I exercised every single day. I don't know if I ever, it's important to take rest days. I can't remember if I was doing a rest day or not because there are some days that I would just walk on the beach. So that counts as earthing, being in the sunlight, being in nature. It counts for a lot of things. And I wasn't actually, yes, I was moving my body, but I wasn't, like making sure I was exercising. But it isn't also important to honor resting during any time that you're trying to transform. You'll also need to build in that rest time. Getting some UVB light in the middle of the day. My goal was to do at least 20 minutes during the day. And then I would do a little bit of Psych K, which is a way that I have learned. I'm trained in Psych K to work with my limiting beliefs, but also I do a lot of havening, the havening touch and Psych K to enhance positive feelings and to enhance what I do want. And so I was adding in that a little bit at night before bed. I would do a havening and some Psych K. Sometimes I would do it in the morning. Sometimes I would do it while I was outside getting my UVB or in sunrise, just whenever I felt like it. But I was doing a few minutes of that around bedtime. I go to bed really early, right? Because I honor the dark. I'm already in blue blockers. And so there's only so much reading I can do with blue blockers and no no real light on. And so I would read for a little bit and I would do my havening and my Psych K and kind of I like to write at the end of the day too. So that was kind of my end of the day ritual. In terms of food, I do really, really well on an animal based diet. And so I just continued my animal based diet and really concentrated on only eating veggies, a little bit of veg, and only what is local and seasonal. Obviously, if it's local, it's seasonal, but eating what's in season, I just made that's kind of always my commitment, but I made that more of a commitment. And then, of course, to abstain from dairy. And at the time, I decided to abstain from anything sweet. So even like my toothpaste, no sweetener in the toothpaste, no, I don't chew gum or anything like that, but also just committing to making sure that nothing's sweet, no honey, no stevia, no natural sweetener, nothing during that whole month because it really helps me. So, hopping outside for sunset being was also a part of my daily ritual. Also, no phone, no electronics. I usually try to do that by at that time. I try to get rid of the electronics by 8 p.m. at the latest, but I was making it earlier. I can't remember exactly when sunset was during October and November, but really committing to not being on electronics after sunset, which I'm really guilty of doing sometimes. That was my daily routine. And then I made some notes about rehab ending. So how to celebrate that, what would I do to for integration. So I was talking about healing and reintegration and kind of what the commitment is. And I'm still to right now completely committed to no dairy. I was somewhere, I was at my sister-in-law's and she cooked some steak with butter and I ate it and it was fine. I just I can't, but I'm committed to not getting really upset if there's somewhere where I need to eat something and there's some kind of dairy in it, but I'm really committed to no dairy and I feel 1,000 times better, so it's easier to do. Um, I'm obviously very committed to no caffeine. when you are an anxiety recovery expert, like, caffeine is not something that we do well when we are chronically anxious. So, yeah, so I'm committed to continuing that, and that's been going really well. Just looking to see if there were any other notes that might have been helpful. Yeah, so then I just had some stuff on my to-do list. I wanted to make sure that the things that absolutely had to get done, that I scheduled them in so that I wasn't stressed or frantic about that, as much as I could just be really present with what I was feeling and my own healing during the intensive. That's what I wanted to do. So that's what I did, and hopefully that's helpful to some of you. Maybe some piece of it kind of resonated with you, something that you have been thinking about doing. But my whole point is that we don't have to we leave our homes and our lives in order to kind of escape for a month to do what we need to do, and you could do that longer too. I just did a month and I felt like that was a really good reset time. My reset course, the quantum stress management course, is a 21-day reset. Really, truly, in 3 weeks, you can turn your life around. So, whatever is going on for you, you can make a significant difference in about 21 days, in about 3 weeks. And a month makes it even easier because then you can add some prep time and some reflection and all of that. So hopefully that is helpful to you. I don't think I had anything else to say, except I do have a note about being authentically present in the here and now. The main goal for me was to be authentically present with whatever was happening in the here and now, as difficult as that might be. That was my whole intention. Was that an intention or was it a goal? I think it was my intention is to be authentically present throughout that month and not kind of have to, because when you're sober, I mean sober, and you're not using a lot of shopping or work or all of the other things that I would normally try to fill my time and fill that kind of intensity, not wanting to feel the intensity of the feelings. I worked really hard to be authentically present in the here and now. And it was not easy to do, but I think that continues to be something that's really important to me in terms of radical self-healing, not just the quantum stuff, but also being authentically present in the here and now. That is the goal. I guess it's a goal. Mhm. It's a goal. It's a daily practice and it's a goal because I have to practice it every single day. So if you heard my episode for the New Year's, on New Year's, about resolutions and intention, I do think of intention as more like using the force rather than having these SMART goals or having a goal. So, really thinking about what is your intention and using the intention, getting really clear about your why. Why is this important to you? And what is the intention? And using that as a force, the frequency around the intention as a force to help move you on the journey. And then the goals that are kind of more of the daily kind of how we going to get there, building the bridge. Yeah. So be well, my friends, and I will see you next week.